again. Um, as you probably all know, my name is Antonio Zapater, blah, 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 blah. And in this session, as we just mentioned, we're going to be talking about FileMonkey, aka FMX. So every time you find FMX, it means FileMonkey. It's usually the acronym we're using in documentation internally, etc. Well, how many of you know about FileMonkey? Okay. How many of you actually use FileMonkey? Okay, cool. Well, as you probably know, FileMonkey, it's a multi-device, natively compiled application to create applications, obviously. Yeah, you can compile for all the major operating systems with Windows, macOS, Linux, iOS, and Android with the same source code, which is quite cool because it's the fastest path to deploying these platforms. It has an automatic adaptive UI based on platform, so depending on which platform you're deploying to, the UI will change. Unless you don't want to, then you can use a stylebox to customize how your applications will look on each platform. And this is something that I'm seeing lately. That we're coming back to prototyping visually and then coding with the same IDE. I've seen Google doing it with Flutter lately. They released, well, not Google itself, but they released Flutter Flow, and they were selling it as this new super cool thing, which is creating your UI and at the same time coding with that UI, which is something that has been since Delphi since forever. So now with FileMonkey, you don't need to prototype in one application, like let's say Adobe XD, and then move all that to code, and then you code the business logic in a different language, etc. It's all batteries included when it comes to application development. And also, you can use most of the Brother Studio or Delphi components, such as the multi-database Access Fire DAC or API REST solutions as well. So we have here on the left, we have the native tools, which obviously have a lot of pros because you have native performance, you have native user experience, the code is compiled, so it's fully secure. But it has the cons that obviously if you're going to develop an application to, let's just stick just with a mobile ecosystem. You need two teams to develop that application. You need one for Android and another one for iOS, which means two different languages. For Android, Java or Kotlin, and for Apple, you need a Shift developer team, which is, I mean, I would say that developing the application is not difficult. The problem afterwards is to maintain those two independent projects. Because if you want to add an extra feature, you need to coordinate those two teams. They have to do a different implementation. And the release, you're probably going to need to delay one release because the feature is not implemented in the other platform yet, which leads to a lot of problems. Obviously higher developer cost because you need two teams, and then you have multiple code bases with different testing, and it's quite resource hungry to use this approach. And on the other hand, you have the web-based tools, which obviously it has also some pros. You just need one team, which leads to lower developer cost, and you get to the market faster. But after all, you develop, providing an unsecure code, and because it's scripted. Even with the latest technologies like Angular, or if you use TypeScript, you kind of compile your code, but it's more obfuscating the code than actually compiling it. So after all, you're sending part of your logic to the end user that they can analyze what's going on behind the scenes. You're not providing compiled code. And obviously scripted performance. I'm talking about web-based tools, which could be SPA or a progressive web app, or also using technologies like Cordova. I think they changed the name now to Capacitor, which is pretty much creating an application for Android or iOS with a browser within. So it's pretty much a web app inside like a wrapper. But we have something that lands quite in the middle, which is FileMonkey. And we have all the pros from both worlds. We have native performance because it's compiled code. We have a native user experience because the platform adapts automatically to the platform where it's been run. It's fully secure because it's code, compiled code. And you also need just one team, which leads again to lower developer cost, and you can get to market much faster. Sorry if I move, this is very creaky. Even though this looks a bit complicated, I'm going to go very quickly through it. It's just in case you don't know how FileMonkey works. Well, this is all the developing platforms you have for iOS, Android, Windows, and then you have the multiple layers that lie underneath. Let's stick to the RadStudio one. So you're going to have just one single project that you can code with Pascal or C++. In this case, let's stick with Pascal. And then you have the FileMonkey layout, which is the one in charge of everything. Depending on which platform you are compiling or developing for, it will access to the interfaces, and then those interfaces will call the specific APIs of each platform. I'd like to, for example, to use as an example, the camera component. You just want to use the camera. So we are providing a camera component that you just drag and drop, and then you use the camera. You type camera.active equal true, and off you go. I don't care what is going on under the hood. I don't care if I'm on Android, if I'm on Windows, if I'm on iOS. I just want to use the camera. So that's what FileMonkey is brilliant for. And there's plenty of other components out of the box, like geolocation, the accelerometer for handling the position of the device. We're going to see just a few because we have just 40 minutes. But if you have Delphi, any version, even professional, you can play around with FileMonkey and see all these very, very cool components. I also wanted to point out that we have Interbase2Go, which is a brilliant solution in case you need to store information in your application. Because after all, your application is going to need to cache some data locally on the phone. And yeah, you can use an XML file or a JSON file, but what happens if you need a quite decent amount of data? You're going to need some kind of database to store all that information. And that's where Interbase2Go lands very nicely, because it's an embedded solution. Let's say that it's like SQLite, but with Interbase2Go, you have encryption at rest. So you can encrypt the data inside the phone itself, which is, initially you can think, why would I encrypt the data in the device? Well, it depends of the kind of data you're handling with. If you're caching sensitive data, let's say, for example, health records or some payment details, and you're saving that information from customers in your phone, what happens if that phone has been stolen or it's been lost? The data is cached in the phone. So if you want to be GDPR compliant, you need to certify that your data is safe in every scenario. So we need to encrypt that data. And Interbase2Go is not only encrypting the whole database, you can even decide which fields you want to encrypt. And you can even have multiple encryption keys, but we're not going to get into that because you can even encrypt based on user roles. But the best bit is that it's cross-platform. You just deploy to iOS, Windows, Android, Linux, and it's the same engine. And even the .ib, which is the name of the database, it's compatible among other platforms. Let's say you want to debug a problem that the customer's having. You get that Interbase database, which is just one file, and you can copy it to your Windows Dev machine and connect to the database, even though it was deployed on an Android device, for example. That's something that is very, very, very handy when it comes to debugging. We also have change views, which is a brilliant solution as well for tracking changes, because it says, for example, with phones, sometimes the connection could be a bit picky, and maybe we'll lose connection with the server, but then we want to still give the access to the user to keep using the application. So with Interbase2Go, we can track the modifications that have happened in the database, and we have all the deltas and everything, and then we can push that once we have internet connection again. I mean, it's not just a matter of a couple of clicks and do it. You need to do the whole implementation, but just having that feature as well built into the phone, it's just brilliant. Okay, enough slides, and let's do a few quick demos. So for the ones you don't know, you can come here to File, New, Multi-Device Application. And this wizard opens, that you have some, let's call them templates that you can use, quite a standard, for example, like a tabbed application, etc. Let's go with the tabbed one. So it's pretty filled with some information. And let's save this. Okay, I'm going to zoom out because it's driving me mad. Let's call it test. Okay, so now we have a tabbed application, very, very simple stuff. And we can also compile this already for Windows. And let's add, for example, just an T-edit, which I'm sure you're more than, you have used a T-edit in the past, for sure. And also, let's drop a button. And just, I don't know, a label. So far, if you're familiar with VCL, this is pretty much VCL so far. This is exactly the same design pattern. You prototype your application here, and then you can just compile and use it. We obviously have access to each tab. I forgot to put this one inside the tab. Let me do the copy and pasted it. There you go. Okay, so we have individual tabs that we can customize the way we want. And let's just compile this for Windows. As we can see here, we have all the, I don't have Linux UI installed in this particular computer, but you can install Linux UI from GetIt in case you're interested in creating Linux UI applications as well. Let's stick with Windows 32 for the moment. We compile this, and yeah, very standard Windows UI. Let's code something. Let's name this edit, for example. I'm doing this very nastily, so don't do it as I do in the future. Let's call it edit 1. And we're going to do here, I'm just going to show a message with edit 1 text. So let's add some very basic logic here. So if I type here, hello IPC, and I click the button, we get a message. Very simple, yeah. Okay, but I want to test this in a different environment. Because I'm using a MacBook, and it has an M1 chip, I can use not only the compiler for macOS, but also the iOS simulator. So let's compile this and see how it looks now on first macOS device. To connect to, obviously we need to compile in the operating system itself. We cannot compile for macOS or for iOS from a Windows machine. That's why we provide this application called PA Server. It comes with Radar Studio or Delphi, and you just need to copy and paste it in the machine you want to or use the installer if you want. In this case, is the PA Server for macOS that you can use for macOS and iOS. If you want to use it for Linux, we're providing as well another PA Server for Linux. What it does, it just creates a client that listens in a port, and you just need to configure this as a platform on Delphi. You do it once, and you can reuse it for every single project. For example, I created this project new, and it's the platform is already pointing to Okay, let me change to macOS ARM, because obviously we can compile not only for macOS, but we can compile for Intel macOS and ARM macOS as well. In this case, I need ARM. And yeah, as you can see here, I already grabbed my macOS configuration because I configured it on the platforms, so I don't need to do it every time. So now if I click compile, it's going to take a few extra seconds compared with Windows, obviously, because we're sending. You could have this in a remote machine because it connects through an API, so through an IP. Sorry. Okay, there you go. We have the application now here. Obviously, the look and feel now it's more macOS, but we also have hello IPC. We press the button, and we get a macOS style. Even I have dark mode. Even that works in the application. As I was saying, this client, you need to connect to the IP where your machine is. So you could even use a remote Linux machine, for example, and connect to the IP and the port, and that's it. Same thing with a macOS. In this case, I'm running a virtual machine, but you could have a macOS machine in your network and use that remotely. Not a problem. So now what we're going to do, let me close this one. And let's make something slightly cooler. We will select the iOS simulator. We get here on the right all the available devices we can compile for. In this case, we have iPad mini, iPad Air, iPad Pro. This is because this template is pre-configured to be used in these devices, but you can define to which devices you want to compile for. So if we select, for example, iPad mini, and we compile, all this information has been pulled from my macOS machine. So this is connected to Xcode, and now in a few seconds it will run the emulator of the iPad mini, and we will see the same application being run on Xcode. There you go. It's running automatically. I'm not touching anything. The iPad mini, I think I've never used the iPad mini emulator, I'm sorry. So maybe it takes a few seconds to run. I usually use iPhone. But yeah, in a few seconds, we're going to see the application running in the iPad mini. In the meantime, because this has finished already, to speed things up a bit, what I want to do is to show you a project that I've personally coded, and we're using it internally for every time we go to an event. This is an application we're actually using, and we install it in all the salespeople phones so they can use it during an event, an Embarcadero event. Well, there you go. Here we have the tabs. Because we're in iOS, the tabs go down automatically. I don't need to do anything. All that's handled by the FileMonkey compiler. And we have here the very ugly UI design in 5 seconds. So I can type here, hello, IPC, click the button, and I get a same message as well. But this is, as you can imagine, is a completely different technology underneath. But my code is valid, exactly the same. So this is the simple example I wanted to do, but I want to show you something more complex. This is an application I coded myself. It's developed in FileMonkey, and the backend is Brad Server. And this is the one we use for events. So I print using FastReport the batches of the attendees with a QR code, and then using the camera, a salesperson can scan the QR code and then get information about the attendee. And also they can mark which products they're interested in. If they're interested in Brad Server, they can take Brad Studio, Interface, whatever. We can configure all that in our backend that is developed using VCL. But that's a different topic. But you can use the camera to scan the QR code, as I said, and then you can even take notes. There's plenty of functionality in the application. So let's quickly show you. And I'm going to connect to the release server, not to the debug server. So we're going to connect to a remote RAD server in production in the cloud, deployed in a Ubuntu 22. Probably need to build this. Give me a second because I need to change something. Because I fully improvised this. I decided to connect to the production server because why not? Okay. So this, please don't take any screenshots because we're going to see data from actual customers. We have here the 3 events I've been attended to lately. So if we access we have here a burger menu that works with, now we're on Windows, and we have a drop down here that looks very Windows to me. We can access all the attendees from the event. We see all the data. We can filter here, for example, my name, and I get the information about the attendee in particular. And here we see the details of the attendee, what they're interested in. Let me zoom out. So I can type the button, I can press the buttons, and off you go. I also can take notes, all this programmed by myself. But the cool bit, if I press here the QR button, hi. This is the built-in camera on my MacBook that has been passed through to the VM. And I'm accessing it through FireMonkey. But you can say, okay, this is cool and all, but I want to see this running in, let's say, the iOS simulator. I say, okay. In this case, I have more devices available. So let's choose iPhone 14, for example. And let's compile for iPhone 14 Pro. And this should run. Also want to prove that I'm connecting to a remote server at this very moment. I'm going to connect using my WireGuard VPN to using SSH, if I remember the IP. Okay, this is running here in the background. Because for mobile, I implemented biometric authentication as well. We have a component that you don't have to be worried about if you're an iOS or you're an Android. It detects the security layer, and on Windows, because I didn't have any, it didn't ask me for anything. But on iOS, because it's a simulator, obviously I don't have Face ID, but it asks me for my personal password. There you go, I'm connected as well. And let me quickly access the Apache log. And let's sudo tailf access log. So we're going to see in real time how the requests keep coming through. There you go, another request. If I type something, I'm searching, and we can see all the requests. Well, this is not the one I attended to, this one, London. So we can keep seeing all the requests coming through the API. And this is a cloud Ubuntu server I have somewhere. And we're seeing exactly the same application with the same functionality, but in iOS. In this case, instead of a drop-down menu, if we click the drop-down menu, we get the iOS drop-down menu. We don't get the ugly Windows drop-down. So as I said, this is 100% platform aware. And also, as we can see, the buttons now, they're blue. And also, if I access an attendee, the tabs go to the bottom as well. But the functionality is exactly the same. And on top of that, I have my Android device here I use for developing. And if you have an Android device, you can, because for iOS it's slightly trickier, not because of Embarcadero, but because of Apple, of course. It used to be a problem to test applications before actually been an official developer because Apple forced you to purchase or be an official developer, so you can have a certificate and then define which devices were for developers. So to test the FireMonkey applications, you had to be an Apple developer. For Android, it was much easier because you can activate the developer mode, and then off you go. You can compile this straight from Delphi to your phone, and you don't need to upload that anywhere else. And you can test the application in the phone. Now, thanks to the new iOS simulator implementation, we can test the application on the simulator. The only requirement is that you need an ARM Apple MacBook or Mac Mini or whatever. It has to be Apple Silicon. Otherwise, the simulator doesn't work. But here in Android, what I can do is I can try to share my screen with a little tool I have. And hopefully it will work. There you go. This is my phone. And I have the application right here. And if we come back to the server log, if I access, and put it here, then we can see the application. And I'm using it right now exactly the same way as the London one, Antonio. There you go. And we can see now that the tabs are on top with an Android look. And again, I didn't have to code absolutely anything. And I have also the QR reader. If I press it, then say hi. And because I have a phone, I can even use the torch here. And again, it's a property of the component that detects if I have a torch or not. But again, same functionality. You can come to interests tab, and we can see how the requests keep coming through the Brad server backend. And again, I want to specify that this is not local. This is in a server in the cloud. Okay. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about this application because obviously it's not just a Hello World example. It has more stuff behind the scenes. It uses a lot of frames because frames, it's like similar to components in the web development world. You create a frame where you encapsulate your UI and some logic if you want to. You can define events and properties and reuse that everywhere. For example, I created all these buttons, frames that I can create live based on the how many interests are created in the backend. But yeah, it's a very, very cool technology using frames, and also you have plenty of other components that you can use for layout. You have layout, of course, you have grid layout, we have flow layout, so you can create more responsive applications in case you want to have a Windows application and also a mobile, and reuse all of that logic. Also, please don't put the logic inside the forms and the layouts. Create your own unit for all the logic that is not related with the UI. And I want to specify how long it took me to develop this myself. It took me a month to develop the backend and the front end. Just me. I was the only developer doing this project. And with this, I'm not saying that I'm an amazing developer. If I did it, you can do it, for sure. Also, I was learning at the same time how Brad Server worked. I'm talking about months and months ago. But I was learning how Brad Server worked. So it was a whole process of learning and also developing. And I had the whole thing ready in a month. I don't want to lie, I added some extra features after that month, after the first event. Obviously, there was some feedback coming from the salespeople, so I had to add some new features and implementations and bug fixes and stuff like that. But my application was ready in a month, not only the UI for Android and iOS, but also the backend with Brad Server. So if you haven't used FireMonkey, please try it, give it a go. You can see how quickly it is, how intuitive it is, because you visualize what you're doing and what you're creating, not like with other tools that you need to code your UI, and you have to be constantly compiling or previewing how it's going to look. And you can also come here, which is something very cool. Let me open the other example we were using, because it's going to be more obvious. We have something called Fire UI, that you can come here to the style, and design mode, you can say, okay, how this is going to look on Mac OS. Then you can see it right there. Or you can, how it's going to look on iOS. And there you go, the tabs went down there. So I don't even need to compile to see how it's going to look. And if I really want to go crazy, we have the multi-device previewer here on the right that you can drag and drop and detach this panel and drag it to another monitor, for example. And then you can see straight away how it's going to look in multiple devices. And you can configure, obviously in this case I have these iOS devices, but you can add Android or you can add Windows, whatever you want, and you can see how it's going to look, the UI, in multiple devices without not even need to compile anything. Then it comes to the app stores. We're trying to make this as painless as possible, but if you haven't uploaded any application to Play Store or the App Store, it's not horribly difficult, but it takes some time because you need to be verified, and then you need the certificates, and then the manifests, blah, 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 blah. We're trying to make this as painless as possible, but for the first deployment, it obviously needs a lot of some configuration that we're trying to help as much as possible with the key stores for Android, etc. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we have some built-in pre-configuration that you can use to store all that information. Once you've been approved, theoretically things go faster, but that's not up to us. Obviously, the approval process, depending on the platform. But yeah, we have, in the project configuration, you have different sections specifically for mobile deployment. And here you have some QR codes in case you're interested about FileMonkey, DocWiki. We have also a very cool low-code example that you can download from Getit. It's quite cool because it's a very nice pre-template application that you can maybe not reuse to create your own application, but it's a very good starting point if you want to follow good practices when it comes to mobile development using FileMonkey, because everything is quite nicely decoupled and abstracted from the UI. And, well, another QR code for Bad Studio in general information. So I think I'm on time, actually. So anyone has any questions? Fair enough. Thank you very much.